This is a vintage Pow'r Pup tractor, dated to probably sometime in the early 60s, early to mid 1960s. These tractors were built from plans that you could purchase from Popular Mechanics magazines or a similar magazine. Homeowner built per se. This is the third one that I've ever had. Each one is a little bit different. The plans came with suggested parts and components that you could use, but naturally folks used different engines. They used different rear ends and transmissions, although most seem to be similar from the perspective of rear ends and transmissions. This particular machine I picked up probably about a month and a half ago, non-running. Did several things to it since I've had it to make it a running, driving machine. This particular tractor has a Wisconsin AN model with a serial number on it, as you can see, which dates to March of 1946 for the motor. When I was initially cleaning it and power washing it, I did notice that some of the paint on the gas tank came off, which I cleaned up a little bit, just enough to identify the fact that this motor, I believe, came from a Boland's Husky Gardner two-wheel walk-behind tractor, and as evidenced by the gear reduction that's there in comparison to the Husky Gardner tractor, I'm pretty confident that's where the engine came from. The transmission appears to be a Ford 3-speed with reverse, and the rear end is an early Ford style banjo rear end. Interestingly, we can tell that they were at one point juice brakes, which leads me to believe that they were a later model Ford, not the early Model A, Model T style, some of which were not juice brakes. Utilizes the emergency cables to stop the tractor, and everything works. So a couple things to highlight from when I received the tractor, when I purchased the tractor. The tractor was not running. It had no spark, and it had a stuck exhaust valve. So went through the carburetor, popped the valve free, cleaned the valve all up, as well as disassembled the Fairbanks Morse magneto, and got that running super hot with one hell of a spark now. Since I purchased the tractor, a couple things that I did. So when I did buy the tractor, there was only a single piece of band iron that was being used as a rudimentary shifter for one of the shift locations right there. So what that did is that only gave the tractor first forward gear, neutral, and reverse. There was, however, the second shifter location, which is the transmission's second and third gear. So I fabricated two brand new dual shifters. So now you have 1, 2, 3 respectively, forward, neutral, and reverse. One thing I did do, so folks don't think I'm a total hack, yes, you can see there is a weld joint in the center. The reason I did that is because the bottom half of that piece of band iron was the original band iron that was there. So I felt compelled from a historic standpoint to at least repurpose what was there and leave it as part of the tractor. So that's the reason why we have that weld joint there. Also, the braking system was a mess. The idea of using the emergency brake cable was great, and I was able to adjust the brakes and get them to work mint, but the handle that was there was just downright dumb, and it was not really safe. So I fabricated a new brake handle, as you can see, which is now spring loaded. So it's, I don't want to call it ergonomically correct, but it's a little bit ergonomically correct, where it doesn't interfere with your knee, it doesn't interfere with the rear tire, and when you do want to engage the brakes, you just simply grab the lever and pull the lever towards you, and it does lock the brakes nicely. Couple other things I did just from a safety standpoint. So I didn't like the fact that, as when you're driving the tractor, being that it's relatively rudimentary, there's a lot of moving parts and it's a bit dangerous, there was no kill switch. So I did create a small little panel right underneath the bottom of the A-frame there with a kill switch, which is wired directly to the points. So in the event of an emergency, you can kill it. Now, I just want to point something out. At the local hardware store, I was able to find this green paint, satin green paint, that somewhat crazily matches the painted green that's on the tractor. So everything that I did kind of sort of blends in, which is kind of cool. The other thing I did from a safety standpoint, just because I drove it a couple times, is I fabricated footrests. So the one thing about these tractors is there's really nowhere to put your feet without interfering with the steering linkage and whatnot. So didn't really want to do that. It was a little bit crazy, a little bit dangerous. So I made footrests for both sides. Now the challenge on this side was with the shifters, pushing things more to the left and then having the steering bar here. This particular footrest, unfortunately, sits about 1 inch taller than the one on the right. Now, I know it looks as though this would be uncomfortable, but it's really not bad. You really don't even really notice it, especially when you are navigating the throttle, which essentially is this crazy rudimentary accelerator pedal. I loved it. It works, it's functional, and it's pretty cool, so I left it there. As you can tell, the motor, gear reduces, goes to a pulley, and it's belt driven off of the accelerator, which tightens the belt, transfers it to a chain on a big sprocket on the transmission, thus going through the transmission. Transmission I have yet to identify. I just haven't pulled the numbers off the tranny, but I am going to pull the numbers off the tranny and figure out what it is. Definitely believe it was a car application, because as you can see, there's your embossment for a speedometer. Kind of cool. Banjo rear, like I said, hydraulic drum brakes, likely a Ford rear. Again, I'm going to pull the numbers off that and figure out exactly what it is. Just haven't gotten there yet. I also replaced, so big job. The steering was completely blown out. I replaced every single bearing in the wheels, the axles, the front steering, all the steering components in the back. Replaced all the bearings with brand new, either sleeve bearings or flange bearings. Steering is super tight, runs great. I changed the front rubber because the rubber was pretty beat. New tubes, new tires. I say new tires, but these tires are not really new. These tires are new in the sense that they're in great shape. But I did have a set of original Carlisle Indian head Carlisles. They're not the greatest. They got a couple little cracks, but they fit the vintage. They're the right size, and I think they match. Personally, I love the old school White Wall Firestone. They're 670 15s. I left them. I love them. On this side, both rear tires are already tubed. This particular tire must have lost air out of the valve stem. The valve stem mechanism was leaking. Must have lost some air. Over time, somebody drove on it, sucked the tube into the rim so that the valve stem was inside the wheel somewhere with an open hole in the rim. So I took the wheel, brought it to my buddy's shop, dismounted the tire. I was planning on replacing the tube until I realized it was just the valve stem mechanism that was leaking. I replaced the mechanism, slid the tube back in, all set to go. So there it is. Pow'r Pup number 3 for me. First 2 I sold, no longer have them. But this is the machine. Love it. It's a great machine, runs, drives, everything's functional at the moment. Hope you enjoyed it. Any questions, feel free to comment below. Happy to help anyone out with any information. Thanks.